The starting point for this project was really to take a piece of film which contained dance and music and to use it to explore musical processes of variation and transformation.
Now, before you settled on a particular sequence, you looked at several others and rejected them. Why, for example, didn't you use this sequence of singing, rather extraordinary singing at that, in Yugoslavia?
The music's wonderful, with different versions of the same tune going on simultaneously. But the amount of visual information there is for something which is essentially not only a musical project, but a visual and musical project, is too low.
And how about this alleged folk dance from Georgia in the Soviet Union?
Now this is hideous.
What do you find hideous about it?
The Las Vegas aspect of it. And the music is symptomatic of that too, where it stops being raw and becomes very, very cooked.
This is a funeral ceremony from the Transylvanian part of Romania, but you didn't want to use it.
It's so complete and so wonderful in its own right. I couldn't become part of that.
From the same area, this is the beginning of a village wedding, the binding of the bride's hair.
I think it's already been done in Les Noces. I wouldn't want to compete with that.
Later on in that same wedding ceremony, there's something that really caught your interest, right? The wedding guests are arriving, and there's this repetitive bagpipe tune.
And all the sounds that go with it, eventually, as well. It's like being given the word. It's just such a strong visual and musical image. Although this has to do with the marriage ceremony. But what eventually happens is the community dancing to express joy. I'm trying to wave my antenna. I'm trying to have an uncluttered, empathic response to the thing. And from that, having chosen the particular sequence, analyze it, and maybe find what it does symbolize for me. At the moment, it's simply a gut level response.
How will you go about analysing the experience? What will that mean?
Well, I shall try and get at it through analysing the music, which will mean notating the various strata of the music that there are, because it's not only the bagpiper, it's the bagpipe drone, it's the bagpipe melody, it's the foot stamping, it's the comments which they're making, and each of those things has a different set of symbols attached to it. The whistling is perhaps imitative of animal noises, the stamping symbolises feet on the earth, the bagpiping melody itself might be attractive, and the drone represents a kind of stability, an anchor for the whole thing to centre around. And from that conglomeration of things comes something which I think is an important message which I can convey to somebody else. This is the experience. I decided I would create a miniature orchestra, but leaving out the bass instruments. So that's because the main tessitura of the original is high. I wanted to retain that, I suppose, slightly attenuated quality. So I've got flute, oboe and clarinet, and then no bassoon, no brass instruments, and violin, viola and cello, no double bass, as stringed instruments, and two percussionists. And also with those instruments, probably I'm going to be able to have doublings on the winds, which the whistling can then be represented either by the high notes of the oboe or by piccolo, or by string harmonics, and or the percussion instruments can do the stamping, whistling, and so on.
Once you'd decided on the size of the band, I suppose you had to move then from the basic music by the bagpiper towards your own kind of music. What's your plan for the next stage?
To begin the kind of digestion and recreation process, having already explained, if you like, what he was doing to myself, that he was making those fragments, that was an important seed possibly in making the piece, that I could reproduce that myself, making a piece which consisted of endless repetitions of the material like a mosaic. Maybe I will do that. I haven't actually got that far. The melody itself all takes place within the interval of a fifth, and predominantly divides the fifth into two thirds, so that there's a melody which takes place within a major third at the top or a minor third at the bottom. It very rarely leaps a fifth. The largest interval in the melody is in fact a third. The rhythm of the melody also gave rise to certain other ways of thinking about rhythms. The rhythm of the dotted quaver plus the semiquaver, and the ornamentation coming at the beginning of that. So you have and so on, little things of that kind, and I notated them all. And by the time I'd notated them, I was already working in a kind of pseudo-analytical kind of way to think, okay, I've got that rhythm, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Supposing I add one semiquaver to it and make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or alternatively 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then you have, from your basic analysis of that melody, you've got a whole chain of other possibilities, rather like saying, I suppose, a colour, and then all the different shadings of that colour are available. And just to clarify things for myself, I wrote down all the available permutations, and well, when I sent it to you, where is it? Eventually on this sheet, 8B, are all the rhythms of the melody and the variations of them, 48 rhythms in whole, which then provide a kind of basic reservoir of material to draw on rhythmically, and there is a similar sheet for the melody. There are two sheets of a similar kind of extrapolation from the original material of the pitch content. One of them, which in a way is the closest to the original material, is modal sequences of notes, because of course the folk music itself is modal with a few chromatic kind of bends in it.
I mean, what is exactly modal?
Well, the bagpipe that is being played, and which in the original movie you see them measuring, is a tube of wood with a limited number of holes in it, and that produces the mode, which is a sequence of notes like a scale, mode and scale being the same thing. And then the whole melody is made out of those available pitches, making the mode of the melody. It's a combination of semitones or not quite semitones and whole tones and not quite whole tones, so it's a little bit irregular. The twiddles, the ornamentation of the melody, because he's producing them sometimes with the embouchure, with the lip pressure, are in fact microtonal. So they're intervals which are smaller than a semitone. And what I did, rather than in fact render the twiddles separately, because they're all very, very much the same kind of shape, was to reproduce the shape of the modes in terms of microtonal equivalence. So I have these two sheets, one of modal derivations of the melody and one of microtonal derivations of the melody. And again, it provides a reservoir for the melodic aspect of the piece. And then very quickly after doing that, I was able to combine the two and make actual melodies, simply in terms of an experiment, to see what the melodies would turn out to be like, without in fact thinking about where they were going to be in relation to the other instruments. Simply inventing folk music.
Show us how you break down and use just one phrase of that bagpipe tune.
A sequence of one-bar melodies. Well, they're the formulae, if you like, the fragments of the melody which the bagpiper is playing on the film. These are the chanter derivatives. And so on. Taking just the first 5 notes of that, and obviously in the right transposition that will be, and then taking the last 4 notes and gradually recycling them so that the last 4 become the first 4 of the next sequence, and one goes on adding then the next note of the bagpipe melody. And then, which are the same notes as these, and then supplying the missing D, and then going on to again take the last 2 notes until one has that whole sequence. From this notes no rhythm, that's combined with the rhythmic reservoir, and then one gets a melody, in this case for the E-flat clarinet. And the opening bar is pretty similar to the opening bar of the bagpipe melody, except the continuity of it, the continuation of that, is not the same. I then start permutating the notes, introducing other kind of note patterns in there. So instead of it even being the modal sequence of notes, it's intercut with some of the microtonal ones. And it becomes a melody which is then like this. Inevitably, as a result of working on